Welcome to the Portland Pentecostals podcast. We're happy you've decided to join us as we build a life-changing relationship with Jesus Christ. Enjoy the message.
Last week, my sermon was very emphatic, very demonstrative, very focused on the power and the grace of God, on the power of the sword, the power of those that are willing to fight even on a maybe, to step out in faith and do mighty things through the power of God. Today I'm reading from Psalm chapter number 18, and this is a reflection of David, the great king of the United Kingdom of Israel, the greatest king likely of Israel, the man after God's own heart, the one who was accepted by God, rejected by others, the one who embraced wholly what God wanted for him, yet in his time of weakness committed sin and crime, but in being confronted by his sin and his crime, he repented. And he's reflecting, and we're not sure exactly what time of his life. It appears that he's been king over the United Kingdom for maybe 15 years, so he's maybe 60 years old, and he's looking back at the way things have been. And in his day, men didn't live that long. They didn't live till ripe old ages like we do in our generation, and he had lived a rough life. He had been homeless. He had been a nomad. He had been a man of war. He had stood in the place of danger many times. And he writes in Psalm 18 and 32, "It is God that girdeth me with strength and maketh my way perfect. He maketh my feet like hinds' feet, and setteth me upon the high places. He teacheth my hand to war, so that a bow of steel is broken by mine arms. Thou hast also given me a shield of thy salvation, and thy right hand hath holden me up, and thy gentleness hath made me great. Thou hast enlarged my steps under me, that my feet did not slip. I have pursued my enemies and overtaken them, neither did I turn again till they were consumed." So he's at peace. He's at a time of rest in his life. This isn't the last battle that he'll fight. It's not the last turmoil that he'll face. But he's reflecting and he's thinking about what brought him to this place of peace. And he says, "Thy gentleness hath made me great." And as you're seated today, thank you for standing. I'll tell you that my approach to my sermon today is very different than my approach to my sermon last Sunday would have been. But I am amazed at the willingness of the Lord to be so gentle with his children. We're serving the all-powerful God of the universe. He is the one who made all things. And I don't know how you think you would handle the universe if you were God. I don't know what you would do about the protesters in the street. I don't know what you'd do about the politicians that are just desperately wicked. I don't know how you would handle the criminals that are at large. I don't know how you'd handle that, but I would guess that many of us would just use our God laser and do away with them. And say they reproduce like rabbits anyway. Somebody's going to replace them. Let's just get rid of all the bad guys and let's create this benevolent dictatorship where everybody does what I say, otherwise they get shot. Maybe that's the way you would do it. I don't know. I'm just trying to get a way into man's brain, because as we see oftentimes when dictators arise, usually that's the mindset that they have. When there's not a government of, for, and by the people, then that's usually the way it ends. It usually ends with a tyrant. And the passage that we just read is so important that it is mirrored in 2 Samuel chapter number 22. So it's recorded twice in the scripture in its totality. Same words. So David writes this, and whoever the scribe is that is monitoring and recording the activities or the history of Israel chooses to include these words of David. And the Old Testament writer speaks of God as being a man of war. And we hear him spoken of in fierceness and brute force and crushing power and vision and vengeance. And he's pictured in the Word of God on a white stallion or with horses and chariots of fire with a sword in his hand. And at the end of the book, it shows him with a sword bathed in blood. So, if we want to look at those descriptive terminologies, they have to do with God's mission and his purpose at a particular time. We see a very powerful God, a violent God, if you please, a God that is ready to take vengeance upon this earth. And last week we spoke of the strength of the sword of God, and which is the Word of God if it's used in our hands correctly. And we agreed to partner with God on a maybe and move forward through the difficult spaces of life. And David said that when he called on the name of the Lord, he appeared. And these are just some of the words that David uses in various scriptures when God appears or shows up. Fire, smoke, stormy seas, lightning, arrows, coals of fire, dark clouds, thunder, hailstones, dark waters, darkness under his feet. The heavens bowed, the earth shook, and the hills moved. That sounds like special effects from a movie to me. And so when God shows up, it's like... It's not the storyline that we're excited about. It's all those special effects, and they're so great that we don't even think about how they make those. But these aren't just special effects that somebody created. These are the effect of God stepping onto the scene to help David defeat his enemy. Now, with all this response from God, David declares in chapter 18 and verse number 29 of Psalm, "For by you I can run through a troop, by my God I can leap over a wall." In other words, he said, these guys, this is not Monday Night Football, but he's just saying, I'm just going to run right through the troops and then I'm going to jump over a wall. And he's not talking about a wall surrounding a sheepfold, but he's talking the city walls. So he feels like his spidey senses are aware. He feels like, man, he's a superhero. Like he's just stepped into God's phone booth that they didn't have back then. And wow, he comes out instead of this guy in a suit with glasses. He comes out in, well, tights and a cape. He comes out feeling totally different. He comes out with a different expectation. He comes out with a different view. And I don't know if you ever used to listen to this, but I'm old enough to listen to old-time radio, and there's still some programs on that you can get on Sirius Radio, or you can subscribe to the app, and you can listen to the Green Hornet, and you can listen to Superman, and it's all left to the imagination. It's not special effects, but your brain is going on, and it's just like, pew, 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 pew. And my mind and my imagination is so crazy that I usually am very aware, but I can drive down the freeway and miss my exit because I'm thinking about what the Green Hornet just did. That was impossible. That with man it was impossible, but the Green Hornet had his superpowers, and it's almost as if that's the way that David is imagining it, and he actually has seen some of this. So God's power is undefinable and it's immeasurable. In fact, Paul puts it this way in Colossians 1 when he's talking about the power of God. He is the image of the invisible God. This is Jesus, the firstborn over all creation. For by him all things were created that are in heaven, that are in earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or principalities or powers. All things were created through him and for him. So you got this God that made it all, and now he can control it all, or he can step in and intervene. In verse 17, for he is before all things, and in him all things consist. He is the head of the body, the church, who is the beginning, the firstborn from the dead, and that in all things he might have preeminence. The Amplified Version says, stand first, or be preeminent, or all-powerful. God is first. He's not just the first, but he's also the last. And he's the creator of all things, so why should he not be able to control all of the powers of the universe? His strength is infinite. Listen to the way that David writes it in 1 Samuel 2. He will guard the feet of his saints, but the wicked shall be silent in darkness. For by strength no man shall prevail. The adversaries of the Lord shall be broken in pieces. From heaven he will thunder against them. The Lord will judge the ends of the earth. He will give strength to his king and exalt the horn of his anointed. And I apologize, that's not David. That's the prayer of Hannah after God answers her and gives her a child. He says, you see how strong God is? My husband and I tried for years and we couldn't have a child. And Penina, she goaded me and she was against me and everybody criticized me and they saw me as barren and therefore unfruitful and set aside by God. But God can do anything, and it wasn't by my strength that this happened. It's God that did this. So God can do anything. He can move mountains. He can cause the lightning to flash. And if you read not just the descriptive terminology that David gives, but we can read out of Isaiah or Jeremiah or many of the other Old Testament prophets, or even step into the New Testament where he calms the storm in the sea and he stops the power of the enemy that is trying to destroy the man that is possessed of the demons. We see God is powerful. And it gives me, the child of God, great confidence that my Father has the strength and power necessary to do anything that I need him to do. Property lines are important. They were to me as a kid. I didn't buy the house and I didn't pay the taxes. But that crack in the sidewalk right at the edge of our driveway that led to the sidewalk in front of the Lucaris house. Most days it was all right, but some days, if I was angry at you, don't cross it. It's my property. It wasn't, well, I saw it as my property, not my dad's property, because, I lived in the house, so. And the Lucaris saw it as their property on the other side, but there was a little bit of debate because the expansion joint and the sidewalk didn't line up exactly. It wasn't just like you could look right down and say, well, there's the fence line. No, it's like, well, it's my sidewalk. No, it's my sidewalk. Don't step over here. I'll knock you into the next county. And we would argue over that, and I can't remember how many times, but enough times that it's stuck in my memory, and probably it's in the Lucaris memory, and it'll come up every once in a while, and hopefully they laugh about it like I would laugh about it now. We did get into a few shoving matches and fist fights over it, but it was our property line. Did anybody ever do that, or am I the only brat maybe I'm the only brat in the neighborhood? But I remember as we would argue over it, the Lucaris would say, well, my dad's bigger than your dad. Well, my dad was bigger than their dad. But when push came to shove, I can remember saying, well, my dad was in the army and he jumped out of airplanes. My dad killed people. And of course, if a kid doesn't understand the impact of that, it's just way out here somewhere in La La Land. We didn't understand the danger that they faced, or even the fact that they didn't ever want to talk about it again. And my dad only talked about it a few times when I asked him when I was in my 30s and he was in his 50s. But I knew my dad had fought in war, and it was always about my dad's bigger, my dad's stronger, and it was about brute force that, okay, if you cross that line again, I'm calling my dad. And sometimes it's that way with God, isn't it? That's the only option that we have. We've done our best. We've pushed with all of our might. We've stood our ground, but it's almost a panic mode when we invoke the name of God. Because we are so used to controlling things ourselves that we don't even invoke the name of God until it's emergency status, that we pull the ripcord and say, "Dear God, I need you. You've got to show up," when God is supposed to be there all the time. And with me, it was like my dad was so great because I thought he was stronger than Pat Lucara. And of course, looking back in my mind, I realized that it wasn't the brute strength of our fathers that made them great. It was the fact that they went to work every day and they provided for their wives and their children. They did what real men do. They stepped up and they got up and they didn't call in sick and they didn't whine. And well, at least my dad showed up to church and he led the family and he was a godly man. It was the quiet strength of my dad. And most of you did not meet my father. There's a few of you that had the privilege of meeting my father. And if you met him, you would never guess that he was a Pathfinder paratrooper, that he went behind the enemy lines and he did battle. He was infantry. You would never guess, because there was just that calm resolve. There was just that calm assurance. Never talked about it, never bragged about it. And most people that have done amazing things in war don't talk about it. It's the guys that weren't as great that have to just embellish their story to make themselves a hero, because they had a job to do and they just went out and did it. And today I want you and I to picture in our mind a man entering his prime, one who had survived against the odds. He'd survived rejection, ridicule, humiliation, threat to his life, hatred by his own family, and he had been forced to flee for his life by the one whose office and person he honored. Saul had chased him away. David was a man who had killed a giant, became a war hero as a teenager, escaped attempts on his life by the king several times, survived rejection. He has battled the physical elements, and he's suffered homelessness, not in a city with all kinds of help nearby. He wasn't having his Social Security check sent to the bank while he lived in a tent somewhere. No, he was on the run, and somebody was after his life. He had to flee to a foreign land and become an immigrant, and he was in exile. But he has survived by wit, determination, strength, and sometimes acting crazy and bargaining with his enemy and training a band of exiles. This was a strong man. He had lived in isolation and loneliness in the harsh environment, and he needed to be watchful and alert all the time. He went through tough times. This was a guy that lived not in the woods outside of Portland, Oregon, but it would have been in the high desert, like outside of Redmond or somewhere like that. It was in a hot, blazing desert place in the summertime and chilling cold at night that would freeze. This was the man named David. But God's an economist, and he uses everything in your life and my life. And you may look at what has happened in your life and say, how could God use that? But I promise you, even if it was something that was negative that happened to you, even if your home life wasn't all that great, even if it's a trail of broken dreams and relationships, God will one day use that for your good and his good if you will let him do that. I promise you that. Because in Romans 8:28, he says, and we know that all things work together for good to those who love God and those who are called according to his purpose. Everything that has happened in your life, God is using it as a collage. And one day, he's going to melt it together. And those sufferings that you had without him now are going to be strengths that you have with him. And the rejection that you suffered and your ability to stand in loneliness is going to serve you well when others reject your honor and your love of God and your respect for his word. You're going to be able to stand and say, well, if I stood for myself and just to protect my own hide and skin, I can stand for the eternal purpose of God. Just a short list of David's early life accomplishment reveals his courage and his physical strength. He killed a lion. He killed a bear. And listen to what he says to Saul when he goes out and Goliath is shooting off his mount. Send out a man that we may fight. And for 40 days, he's just been blabbering on. And David walks into the camp with a fresh set of eyes. And sometimes that's what happens. An evangelist or a guest preacher walks in with a fresh set of eyes and he speaks and we go, whoa, whoa, whoa. And we go, yeah, I can do that. Because he sees things as they clearly are. And he says, who is this uncircumcised Philistine? Who's this guy that's not submitted to God? What's he doing? He's defying the armies of the living God. And we know that eventually he comes before Saul. And Saul tries to give him his armor that's way too big and doesn't fit. And it'd be just like giving a little 3-year-old a 10-speed bicycle and a pair of cleated shoes that are size 9 and said, here, go for a ride, have fun. It just doesn't work. He says, no, that's not the way it works. And listen to verse number 34 of 1 Samuel 17, this conversation. He says, I've been taking care of my father's sheep, he said. When a lion or a bear comes to steal a lamb from the flock, I go after it with a club and I take the lamb from its mouth. And if an animal turns on me, I catch it by the jaw and I club it to death. So he knocked out the warrior giant Goliath. But you see, he had this way of operating. He wasn't living in a defensive mode. He wasn't just going to let the animal maul the sheep, but he was going to save his father's sheep, and he was going to fight for us. And I know what I do. If he grabs him, I'm going to turn around, grab him by the jaw, rip it open, and club him over the head. I'm killing him. He had this strength and that confidence. Forget MMA, dude. I mean, you read some of these stories. These guys were amazing. David was a dude. I mean, he was like, he could hang with any of it, man. And then you look at David's mighty men and what they did, but they had courage and they did things that were superhuman. It was like they had stepped into the phone booth at their time and stepped back out and said, "Want some? Come on, we're going to get it." So again, we're talking about strength, brute strength and power, and it was honored. And so strong was David that in 1 Samuel 18, when they returned from battle, the women sang and they danced and said, "Saul has slain his thousands, but David his 10,000s." And David became the youngest military leader Israel would ever know, and he quickly rose to the top. The people loved him. Even his brothers had to be submitted to him. And he was taken to the king's palace to live and given his daughter Michal to be a wife, and he became a tax-free citizen in Israel. Hallelujah. He was strong and he was a hero. Kind of nice they sent our tax bill on the same day they sent our ballot. So we'd think it's all about brute force. So this is a tough guy. This is a man made of steel. This is a guy that's not afraid of anyone or anything. And he's submitted to God. And eventually he becomes king in Hebron and then king over all Jerusalem. And recently we talked about that on the day that we said, talked about killing the blind man or not letting ourselves have victim mentality, where eventually they took over Jerusalem. And everybody looks at him and think, wow, is he pumping iron every day? I mean, does he have a hidden gym somewhere in his house? What makes this guy so tough? And in verse 34 again of Psalm 18, he says, "He teacheth my hands to war so that a bow of steel is broken by mine arms." Snap. Come on, guys, you ready? I should have brought one. At least a piece of rebar. I mean, think about this. He's saying, boom. He was a dude. He understood brute force, and us guys kind of like that. Some of you girls like it too. Don't fool yourself. One of my neighbors likes that. I drive by the house and she's got her whole gym set up and she's out there doing the yard work while I don't know, her husband's got the dish towel or something like that. She's got the cool car. just saying. These were great feats. David was perceived as being great, and he was great. But it's the way David viewed it. Was it his brute force and strength, his cunning, his prowess, his virility or his courage, or the praise of the people that made him great? Listen again to 1 Samuel 2:9. He will guard the feet of his saints, but the wicked shall be silent in darkness, for by strength no man shall prevail. Remember, that's what this Hannah wrote. Nobody's going to overcome God by strength. It's not the strength of man that gets it done. You see, David knew that one day his brute force would fade, that likely his eye would not be as keen as it was. And if a giant walked out onto the field, the swing of his sling wouldn't be as accurate as it used to be. That's not what really makes us great. Yes, we need to stand and fight with the sword of the Spirit in our hand. Yes, the sword of the Lord will defend us. And we are surrounded, but we are surrounded by the angels of the Lord, as we spoke about. If you happen to come on Tuesday night, the angel of the Lord encampeth round about them that fear him. An innumerable host of angels are camping round about you and I. There was a much different view that David had of greatness. And we read it again in Psalm 18 and 35. Thou hast given me the shield of thy salvation, and thy right hand hath holden me up. So he's saying, now I haven't held myself up. I didn't do my reps every day and make myself strong. It wasn't because I went out and practiced and became a skilled warrior. It's what you've done, God. It's your salvation, and it's your right hand. And thy gentleness hath made me great. The gentleness of God is what makes us great. We need his gentleness. We need his persistent, consistent love. We need the Father, not the Father that I imagined that fought in the Korean conflict, that I didn't even realize what he did until later. But it was the Father who was always there. It was the Father who said, no, you're not going to do that. It was the Father that quietly led, that stood for morality and against immorality, and guarded his home from the things that should not be there. And we didn't even know some of the things that tried to come in the home. He just shut the door on the things that did come in the home. Who made the house a refuge, who made the house a place of prayer, who showed us how to be worshipers in the house of God. We need the gentle hand of God to guide us. We live in a world that's filled with anger. Whew. Protests everywhere. And we don't see them right now in Portland, unless I just didn't listen to the news getting up on Sunday morning, which I rarely do because I don't want it to interfere with what God has to say. But you look across France, and the Yellowcoats they're protesting every week. When we were in Barcelona, Spain a few years ago, there were protests in the streets of Barcelona, Spain, and there were tens of thousands of people marching down the streets protesting against the immigration policy there. We see a world that is filled with anger, and you can listen to almost hear the clack of the keys as people type on Twitter or Facebook or Instagram or post. You can hear their voices on TikTok or whatever you look to, and people are screaming. They're angry, they're violent, they're hurt, they're fearful, and their voices are being heard across the land. And it's the thought that if I just push hard enough, if I yell hard enough, if I use vulgarity, maybe they'll listen to me, maybe it'll stop. But it's the gentleness of God that makes us great. Our world needs to see men and women who are not filled with anger, who are not yelling violently, who are not cursing the darkness, but are speaking the love of God, that are speaking gentleness and goodness and kindness, and declaring the goodness of God and speaking peace into our world. God is going to show his gentleness in a specific way. And he will do for you and me what he did for David. Listen to the word picture that the poet David paints in Psalm 18 and 36. You have given plenty of room for my steps under me, that my feet would not slip. That's the Amplified. The New King James says, you enlarged my path under me so that my feet did not slip. And so if you were hiking through Eastern Oregon, or maybe you were down on a river, which would you rather have to walk on, a rope or a pole? Okay, a pole or a log. Or maybe a log or a footpath. I know what most people would choose. They would choose the footbridge. And that's exactly what God gives to you and I. Our world is on a tightrope, and they're not sure where to go, and they're tipping, and they're moving, and they're bobbing, and they're trying to cross the turbulent waters of social unrest and injustice and the fear and the war and the turmoil. But you and I, we have a solid place to walk on. He's enlarged the place under our feet, so we're not having to tippy-toe and look for a place to put our foot, but we just see the bridge in front of us and we just walk right across the bridge. Thy gentleness has made me great. You enlarged my path under me, God. You gave me a clear path to walk in. We're not living with uncertainty. We may be living in uncertain times, but I know who I have believed and am persuaded that he is able to keep that which I have committed unto him against that day. God's taking care of you and I. You and I will leave this place today declaring, thy gentleness hath made me great. If you'd stand with me, and I know I've shouted a little. I think I'm supposed to. At least that's what they told me. No. But I want us to turn inward and just slow it down just a little bit and think about the arms of God reaching toward us. I saw something, there's so many stupid things they've advertised. And my wife and I have never owned a TV that's connected to, ABC or NBC or any of that kind of junk. We just never have. But as seen on TV, now it's on YouTube. So, oh well. Remember a preacher preaching about the fat belt that you put on and it melts fat. I could sell you one. I know. $19.95 a month. Yeah. I'm just thinking, where does all that fat go? Do they make candles out of it, or, I don't know. It melts. And I can't tell you what I was watching because, who knows how those metrics work that feed us the ads that we look, Now, I remember looking at a pair of shoes online, and I bought the pair of shoes, and for 6 weeks they were advertising that same pair of shoes to me. It's like, shut up! Almost enough to make you want to go duck, duck, go. It's just like, don't try to sell those to me. I already bought them, okay? But I was watching something, and this ad comes up. And it's some kind of gizmo that the guy stuck to his abs, and it's supposed to, before and after picture. The before looked like me, and the after looked like, well, I don't know. Keep your shirts down, guys. I don't know. It's just like, he had a six-pack. And all he had to do was wear this thing that gave electrical impulses that would make his muscles go like this. And it's like, what a miracle. And it's not like we just can step into the arena and say, okay, God, make me a brute force. But he gently leads us and guides us day by day through our fears, through our struggle, beyond and through the anger. And in the midst of turmoil, he just says, come near and let's have a talk, son, daughter. My gentleness is what's going to make you great. It's your consistent time in the presence of God. Not yelling at him and demanding that he fix the problems of the world. Not begging and pleading that He makes everything just like you wanted in this life, but saying, God, You're preparing a table before me in the presence of my enemy. God, I'm coming to spend time in Your presence. So He has arrived in this place with His love, and He wants to hold your hand, and He wants to embrace your heart. He's present today, and He's calling you and I right now. He is here to assure you that He is your ever-present help in time of trouble. Does that mean all the stress of the world is going to go away? No. But He'll give you purpose and design. And He'll give you the wisdom to let go of the things that you should let go of and embrace the causes that you should embrace. He put it this way in Matthew 11:28, "Come unto me, all you who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn of me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." Oh yeah, He'll give you a burden, but it fits you. He'll give you a yoke. It's not like trying to put the jacket on and it doesn't button anymore, but it's kind of ripping at the seams. Not these ones. Say it doesn't fit anymore. No, God says, here, this fits you. Because God knows your heart. He knows your skills. He knows your gifts. He knows your calling. Is there anybody that just wants to be embraced by the Lord? That you just want to step up and say, God, okay, there was confusion and I'm not sure what to pay attention to, but God, You show me what to pay attention to. You show me what to focus on. You show me what battles to fight. You show me where I should put my energy and my purpose. Or maybe you just want to come and say, okay, God, I want to find rest for my soul in this place. This altar is open. Let's make this place a place where God embraces us, where we're not stiff-arming God or pushing Him back. It's not about doing our sit-ups or our push-ups or having the right equipment to make us strong, but say, God, I need Your gentleness. I need what You gave to David. I need to happen in my life. What happened in the hero of old. I need You to touch me. I need You to change me. I need You, God. Thank You for Your gentleness. Thank You for Your goodness, God.